going to give a few more minutes. The Petersons said they were making their way here through the snow, so we'll just wait a couple more minutes.
I am going to need a microphone. I don't think I can project that well here, but welcome and thank you all for coming out, braving the weather to celebrate the life of Fred and Kay Barnes. I think it's a testament to the impact that they had and that the Smike family has had and the love that we can share and honor in their lives, that everybody is here despite the weather and despite having to get through a whiteout in order to be here. If I can, I'd love to open us up in a prayer and then invite everybody immediately after that to sing a hymn that was meaningful to the Barneses, and that is "How Great Thou Art." We'll sing that in just a moment, but will you join me in prayer right now? Father God, to everything there is a season. A time for every purpose under heaven, your word says. A time to be born and a time to die. So as we journey together in this celebration of life service for Fred and for Kay, we rejoice in knowing that you are the resurrection and the life. So we shall not mourn today, because you promised to wipe away every tear from our eyes. We celebrate their life today and pray that your light shall continue to shine upon us. Be with us today as we honor their memory. In Christ's name, amen.
Okay, I wanted to kind of tell my mom and dad's life story. And so my mom was born in Los Angeles in 1930, and her dad was a shipbuilder, and her mom, Grace, was a piano teacher. And her mom had a grand piano back in New York where she studied music, and she had it shipped via the newly opened Panama Canal to LA, and I eventually had it shipped up to our house. It's on our house at the trail. But very sadly, Grace died giving birth to my mom, and so she never knew her mom. So she went to live with the grandparents that were down the street, and this is my mom. Somebody said she looks like Jessie. And her grandparents were wonderful to her. He was a builder. He built both their houses, her dad's house and their house, and the mother was a seamstress, so she made all these dresses. And the dad built her a playhouse. I still have the chair from that, and he built a dollhouse for her that I also have. And here's some of the dresses that her grandma made for her. And about when she was 5, her dad met Olga and fell in love and got married. And so my mom moved back in with them when she was 5 years old. And this is the grandma that I knew. And that's her first day of school there on the left, first grade. And when she was in 4th grade, she started piano lessons. And she also she had trouble with this boy in school, and she was always proud of this fact. Her dad showed her how to make a fist, And he said, and he always took the candy from her on the way home. And well, I don't think it was this guy, but anyhow, he said, just punch him. And so she did. She punched him in the nose, but it happened to be above a set of stairs, and the kid rolled down the stairs, and he never bothered her again. But she was really proud of that story. They went camping a lot in the mountains east of LA. That's a little chickadee on her finger. And this is the campsite that her grandparents would go up. That's her grandma. And this was her best friend, Jenny, that she made, who still wrote to her as of last year. And she named her first two children, Kathy and Fred, after my mom and dad. But this is them getting ready for prom. And when my mom was like in 7th grade, she was like practicing super hard. She went to UCLA and went to the head of the music department and gave a recital to him. And she really wanted piano lessons, more advanced piano lessons, and so she was accepted, but she went home and her parents couldn't afford it, so she wasn't able to go, but she went to a lot of trouble. This is summer camp. She spent a lot of summers up in the mountains going to camp, and that's my mom on the right in the long johns and her friends. This is when she was 15 years old, and there's lots of stories of boyfriends, and lots of pictures of boyfriends. So they went to Huntington Beach. The girls all spent a lot of time there. There's some old pictures of Mom and one of her friends. And then they were in LA, and Alhambra was the name of the place. So this is what they wore to school, you guys. That's the kids out there. Anyhow, they all had their A's on their shirts. And my mom's right in front center there. So my grandpa, he had a really bad cough from working as a welder in the shipyard and decided to move up to the mountains. And they found a place in Mariposa, a 200-acre ranch. And so they moved from this beautiful home that her grandpa built in Alhambra to this place. And so it didn't have electricity at first, and it had a wood stove that they cooked on, and eventually it got a 10-party phone line, and so it was really remote. And my mom loved it. There was 5 gates you had to go through other people's property to get there, and she was starting to write a book, The 5 Gates to Heaven. She just loved the animals. And her friend Jenny, her best friend Jenny, drove all the way up there, like it's probably a 4 or 5 hour drive, and family to visit with them. And they raised goats, and they had horses and everything, and they were going to raise goats to sell them, and my grandpa got so attached to them that they ended up, my grandma had to go to work. And they had a lot of goats. And my mom learned to shoot and hunt and snow. They didn't have much snow in LA, so there she is with snow. And exploring the ranch, there was like 8 springs on it, and there was an area, it was called Indian Peak, where the Indians used to grind their acorns and stuff in the rocks. You could still see that. And so this was her senior year, and she ended up being a lead in the play and also the editor of the paper and the yearbook, and she was really social. And here are some of her friends coming out to the ranch. She'd have, barbecues and parties out there. And some of the boyfriends in her last year of high school. And that was her senior picture for high school graduation. So my dad, he was born in 1928, and he had 1 sister, and his dad was in World War I and in France, and actually got mustard gas. So I never met him, but he was a cook on the front lines and a butcher. So I had to put this in. This is his football team. How do you like those uniforms? So his dad was pretty athletic. And then his mom was extremely athletic. That's his mother, and she had 11 brothers and sisters. And so there was always uncles, aunts, and loads of cousins. They all lived in the Central Valley of California. And my grandma, there she is on a basketball team. She's on the right there. And those are their uniforms or what they played basketball in. But she pole vaulted in high school 8 feet on a bamboo pole. So she was really adventuresome. She went into Yosemite in a horse and buggy. It took 10 days to get in with her girlfriends and sisters, and then camped and came back out. And there's a couple pictures. So they moved all over the place when my dad was young. He was a butcher, and then they moved up to Mariposa, where my mom lived, but later. They didn't live there at the same time. And Dad, he was like a holy terror. In kindergarten, he brought a knife to school, got in a fist fight. By 4th grade, he was smoking a pipe, got caught doing that in school. He was stealing cigarettes and money from a store he was working at, which was his relative. And I found a letter that he wrote later, a draft of it, and it was something about he was sending money back to that person. But he was... So in 4th grade, he moved up to Mariposa, and he started pole vaulting. He got the bamboo pole that the carpets were rolled up on in the store, and he started pole vaulting with his cousin Don over anything they could, over the creek, over the street, over the fences, and that's when he got his start. He kind of looks like the Holy Terror over here on the right. He looks real innocent in the other one. But so he got his start on pole vaulting. And then they moved back down to the Central Valley to the Rap was his mom's maiden name, where this is his Uncle Pat. He really started turkey ranching in the Central Valley of California, and these are his turkey broods. So my dad loved being on the ranch. There was 3 homes on the ranch, and he, got to do all this mechanical stuff. He said he had a surfboard behind the tractor, and he was hunting and shooting and loved it, and they'd spend the summers up in the mountains, and they'd bring the turkeys up there and rotisserie them on there, and all like 11 brothers and sisters and all their families would come up there, and they just spend the whole summer up there. That was fun times for him. And when he was 14, he kind of decided to take the terror out of Holy Terror, and he devoted his life to Christ, and he always tried to follow the teachings of Christ for the rest of his life. So right afterwards, he joined the Army. He was trying to avoid the draft, which 4 days after he joined got canceled. But anyhow, he joined the Army. and they sent him to Seoul, in South Korea. And he went as a cook, like his dad. And this was before the war in Korea, so it was 47. And that was his first love, actually, the lady on the right. I can't remember her name, but he just had a ball. He was in this hotel that had American civilians living in it, and he was the head chef, but the crew, they knew how to cook so well that it wasn't a hard job for him, but he had to order all the food and everything. So when he was there, they said they put together a track team of military guys and took him to Japan. Now, this is 2 years after the bomb was dropped on Japan, and this is a little out of order. This is the people he worked with in the kitchen there. But he went to Japan and pole vaulted in a meet there, and this is Nagasaki. That arrow is pointing to where the bomb hit 2 years before, and that's a Catholic church on the left that was destroyed. So when he came back, he got his first car, and he went down to Southern California to Bible college for 2 years. And he worked on Skid Row, doing missionary stuff down there. And then he was pole vaulting quite a bit. And so they were like, well, people were encouraging him to go on with pole vaulting. So he switched to Fresno State and started getting coached there. Well, first I'll tell about Mom. Mom was there also. She was going to become a nurse. And so they met at their boarding house. And this is Mrs. Connolly, the older lady. She was like the matchmaker, except for she was really strict. She wouldn't let them meet in the kitchen or anything. But anyhow, she was she was the matchmaker. And so here Dad is, so he started doing serious pole vaulting. This guy that's showing him, his coach, was Dutch Warmerdam. He held the world record for 15 years on a bamboo pole, like 15 feet, 8 inches on a bamboo. No one could go over 15 feet. He's an incredible person. And so my dad was so lucky to be coached by him. Here's just some pictures of this crazy sport. And his dad was super proud. His dad died in the 50s of lung cancer from the mustard gas, but was able to see his son do all this pole vaulting. And in 53, for the coronation year, Dad went to the British Games in London, and when Queen Elizabeth was coronated. And that's the team that went with him. And he took first place in London and brought back some stuff. The dishes I still have, those were the prizes they gave out to athletes. Kind of funny. And everyone, you notice TSA would not like this, but you could go right out to the plane and welcome them while they came off the plane back in the day. So this is, let's see if I can do this, Jesse. Where do I press start? So this is some movies of him pole vaulting, and I think it's from 40s and early 50s because he's landing on dirt or sawdust on all of this. But Jesse's going to help me start it because this is her computer. So this is kind of a crazy sport. And I have his pole out there. You can see it. It's like 18 feet tall. It's out in the foyer there. Okay. Whoops. Okay, and then this is he was interviewed. He was inducted to the Hall of Fame, and this is just a little thing that he said in it that was very important to him.
When I look for the bamboo pole to get it in my vault for life problems, I want Jesus Christ as my pole. Then I can put everything into it, and he gives it back to me right when I need it to get over heights or difficulty in life.
Okay, so my mom, she was kind of back and forth to school because she couldn't afford it. So she was like a roving reporter, an accompanist. She taught school. She was a music teacher in all of Mariposa County, which meant she went to one-room schoolhouses like in Yosemite Valley and stuff and taught school. Really, really neat. And there's her teacher picture. And so Dad started dating her, and this was up in Mariposa. He he forgot to put the emergency brake on, so she was so impressed though that they did get married. Her second grade class put all the cans on the back of the car, and here's just a few wedding pictures of them. And they got married up in Mariposa in a little Methodist church there. And that's both their parents. And then I just put a few in here over their 25th wedding anniversary. This is in Fresno, where I was raised, and that's my brother and I. And then their 50th wedding anniversary was in Mariposa, and that's both their maid of honor and the best man. My brother and I again. And their 60th wedding anniversary up in Cordova, which some of you came to. This was at the Ackley's house. They weren't home, but I had a party there.
Secrets are coming back.
And then their 65th wedding anniversary was the last one before Dad passed, and that was at the Reluctant. So, like every newlywed, you get matching pajamas. And this was on their honeymoon. They went to the coast, and it's Mom. And they went back to say thank you, Miss Connolly, for setting us up, matchmaking. And they got a start on life. They got a car, a dog. They built a house. My dad got a school teaching job. He was teaching 5th grade, and he also had a wood cutting business, so that's his. He'd go around and deliver wood to everybody. And that was back when, you had no student aids or anything, and you had 40 kids in a class. You had huge classes. Oh, and I should mention, when he was teaching, he got invited to Jesse Owens from the 30s, the Olympic star. He was in Fresno, and Dad got invited to sit with him at the table. And then he brought him to his class and to his school to give out the awards to all the track and field kids. So that was pretty neat. I have a letter out there that's from Jesse Owens. And in 1960, they had me. And life changed again. They're teaching me how to make cement. And then my brother came along in 63. He's a redhead also. And of course, we always had dogs. If you know my parents, they loved animals. So we always had 3 dogs at any given time. And Mom took a lot of these pictures. She's not in them, but they were very playful. My dad loved to play, so maybe more than us. And yeah, these are just pictures of him. And then we had 4 pianos in our house when I was growing up. My mom was a piano teacher. There she is teaching my brother to play. He was a good pianist, and me playing piano. We had the grand piano and 2 in her music room to teach, and then this other Wurlitzer. So Mom was really involved. She had 30 to 40 students every week would come to the house. We had all sorts of recitals, all sorts of competitions, like composition or memory contests. The Nostines would kill everybody on that one. They always have everything memorized. And then she would help organize this pianorama with 40 pianos on a stage and 80 people playing at the same time.
Wow.
So she taught for 55 years. Piano lessons, hundreds and hundreds of students. Those are some of her students in the later years. And my dad played banjo. He wasn't really very good at it, but he played with this banjo band. And so we'd go all over the place watching the banjo band in Fresno. They had the gut bucket, and yeah, that was fun. And then, of course, he tried to teach us how to pole vault. My brother was much more athletic than me, so we had this little pole. I had to jump into bed like I was jumping over a bar. And then we had a mat and everything, but I just wasn't brave enough to do it. So he was all his friends, and a lot of them would come by and visit, and some of them were gold medalists. I got to see some of the gold medals from the Olympics, and they were the sawdust vets. History's first 15-foot pole vault was in sawdust. They were proud of that. And family was super important. I told you my grandma, she had 11 brothers and sisters. Well, this is we had lots of big family reunions on my dad's side of the family. And that's my dad's sister and mom and dad, or stepdad. And then what was really unique was both grandparents would come for holidays. They knew each other really well. And we always went up to at the 200-acre ranch in the mountains, and they still had some burros. And Christmas time was really important. We also went to the turkey ranch. So almost every month we went to both places. And Christmas was, Mom and Dad loved Christmas. Loved to decorate. These presents are wrapped and decorated by my dad. He would just get into it. Like this, I don't even remember what the telephone was, but it was some sort of unusual shaped present. And then that was a barbecue grill, the other one there, with my brother and his wife. And Mom would always fix big dinners, the turkey, but Dad was the carver. He carved the turkey. And then birthday celebrations. This was for my brother, who was actually a really good pianist, and that's my brother and I. And Mom, she was the most spoiled. Like I fixed her green eggs and ham, and I made him green. It was horrible. In bed. We'd always make her breakfast in bed. And my brother, he continued to make sure Mom always, when I was up here, had a birthday celebration. My favorite things were outings, and that little blue suit, my dad made that for me, that little sun suit. And we camped. We went from the old car up to the van eventually, and we camped almost every month, and then 6 weeks in the summer. Both parents were teachers. And it either had something to do with finding rocks, that's gold panning, or fishing. And or going with groups of friends, and you can't do that anymore, but we'd stick everybody in the station wagon or in the camper. It was just a blast, and we'd go and camp. And these are some pictures. We'd go all along the West Coast and then into Lake Utah and stuff, and spent a lot of time in the summers there. So we'd go for these 6-week trips in the summer. More fish, more clams. And that's cleaning hundreds of clams. We were like, oh, do we have to clam? And then on every trip, my mom would have something special up in this one cupboard that she'd pull out for us. It'd be a puzzle or a good book or something. And we had the 3 dogs. And we went snow camping in the winter, and my he would take his 5th grade class up there and then bring us all along to Inner Tube. There you are, Lynette. And the last half of the summer, my dad worked at the Del Monte Peach Cannery, and it was like over 100 degrees all the time there, and so he made homemade ice cream, and that's something he loved to do all his life, was make homemade ice cream, so they made him that shirt. And these are just a few pictures of Mom and Dad. In the middle, on their 25th wedding anniversary, they came to Alaska. They were going to homestead up here, and then Mom got pregnant with me, and they decided not to. But their 25th wedding anniversary, they came up to Alaska. I remember having to do my mom's hair. See that bun? You'd rat it down so it would stick up really high. Be glad I don't ask you to do that, Jesse. Yeah. This is a couple family pictures. So here we are as teenagers, and then I graduated. It's the only graduation picture I could find from high school in '78. And I stuck around. I didn't want to leave home yet. So I went to City College, and this is when I started playing handbells at our church. So this is our house. We brought the handbell ringers there and started cleaning the bells, and went to Hawaii and played with 1,000 ringers in Hawaii. Came from all over the United States. And Mom and Dad went with us. And we also, this is the ranch. She still has that wood stove up there at this point. But she had another stove and oven that she could cook on. So we always visited, and now only my one grandma was left. So Mom and Dad decided, after my brother and I were kind of out of the house, to move back to Mariposa. And it's right near Yosemite, so it's just gorgeous. And they bought this house in the mountains and lived here for 25, 30 years. This is the backyard. We took a family picture. And Mom opened up an antique store called Fabled Cottage Antique and Kay's Piano Studio. So she was still teaching piano, And there's Dave. So she taught piano to Tanya Zastro. That's how Tanya got to know me and how she came up here and fell in love with Dave. Anyhow. And that is their shop, and it's downstairs exactly in the same place where my dad's dad was a butcher when he moved to Mariposa. So it's pretty incredible. And the hotel above that, my grandma, she ran that hotel. So there's the piano that's in Katie's here. Katie, that's the piano that's in the house. It's over 100 years old. So my mom would play piano and have this antique store, and people would come back year after year to the antique store from all over the world, going up to Yosemite. And Dad was making his free ice cream on July 4th, 4 different, I made some for you guys tonight, a couple containers, not 4 containers. And then, so Dad, he decided the antique store wasn't enough, he wanted to upholster and refinish, so he learned how to do that. That's a chair he caned, and he had a big sewing machine, he could upholster, he could refinish stuff. And during this time was when they said, we'd like to induct you into the Fresno Hall of Fame. So, and every year he would go for dinner here. It was super neat. And me, being me, I said, well, my friends want to come up and go skiing in Yosemite. Can I have 11 people up? And it was 23, and they were sleeping all around my parents' bed, in the bathroom, all over the place. And then Dad got up in the morning and fixed them all Swedish pancakes. And then I graduated from college finally. My grandma said she couldn't believe she lived to see the day. And so Mom and Dad came over to Cal Poly. And then I went on to Alaska, and I met Dana, and brought him to California with the land of the fruit and the nuts. That's what he would say every time we crossed the border. And he got to meet Mom and Dad and play cards, and we got married at Mom and Dad's house in the mountains. And that's Dana's mom down there. And Dana's mom and my mom always wrote to each other after that. And then my brother got married at the 200-acre ranch, my grandma's ranch. And so now Mom and Dad have grandchildren. It's my brother. And my mom, I just had to put this in, she never had her own car, and she got this beautiful car. And she took such good care of my grandma. They had so much fun. That's them on New Year's and Mother's Day. And there was an 80th birthday party for my grandma that my mom put on. And here's up at the ranch. It was really a fun place to go to. And lots of get-togethers with Grandma. And that's Yosemite. And then, of course, my dad being my dad, it's not enough to have the antique store and refinish and upholster. He decides to be a postman. So he gets those two little white Jeeps. And he delivers mail all over Mariposa County. And then they kept breaking down. So then he decided to work for California overnight. And he'd drive 500 miles a day and deliver packages. And he was he was 80, I think, when he was doing that. So we were pretty worried. All the highway patrolmen knew him because he'd stop and sleep on the side of the road. There he is. Picking up junk somewhere. And he couldn't stop cutting wood either, even into his 80s. So he'd see an old oak tree and go ask people, and he'd cut wood. And another thing he liked doing was making things. And this is a vest. I have it out here. He worked with Patience Faulkner and kept coming up here year after year, and finally finished his vest and won first place in the fair. He also liked to bake, and so these are cream puffs. Some of you probably had his cream puffs at church. And he won something for those. And he taught square dance and weaving to elementary school kids. So he'd go down the valley to Fresno and teach, and then when I brought him up here, he was still teaching. He asked me if he could teach here with Miss Corio, and I thought, she might not have enough patience for this. So he taught square dancing. And there's some pictures of Dad. Oh, and on the left up there, he came up to see the Ice Worm Festival, just decided to come up for a weekend, and came up, and I was in the survival suit race, and so he got to watch me do something athletic. I think I won for women that year, so that was good. There's some fun pictures of Mom. this was really, Mom always wanted to go on a helicopter ride, so she finally got one out of Mariposa. And then they started having grandkids. Here's Jessie. And we'd go up and down Mariposa. They would come up here. And then Riley was born. And both Mom and Dad came up to spend time with Riley. We only had him for 5.5 months. And they were here for the funeral, too. So. Then there's Casey. And she was a redhead, so my dad, who was Fred Red Barnes, was very connected to Casey. They both were stubborn, are stubborn. Yeah, so there's Casey and Jessie pulling Grandma along. She and Grandma had quite the relationship. And then Rhea came along. Yep. So they would always come up to Alaska. Once we started having kids, they came up here once or twice every year. This was for the dedication at church of, this one's Rhea and Casey. It's by the hospital. And then we would go down there once or twice a year, have big Thanksgiving. We played lots of cards. And we'd constantly be dealing with pine needles. I don't know if any of you have lived where there's pine needles, but you have to burn them. So we always rake and chop wood for Mom and Dad. And then we go on outings to the coast. Christmas. And kids are like, why did you dress us like that? And my brother would always come up, so we'd have big things together. And there on the left, my brother, my dad's still doing presents, goofy presents. But, so they brought my grandma, who had never been on a jet, when she was 85, up to see Jessie when she was born. And I just took them all over Alaska. And so my grandma was way up for it. So there's 4 generations. Child's Glacier. Oh, my parents loved Child's Glacier. In fact, we were there for the big wave. We were there like 4 hours after it happened. That's a big chunk of Child's. And my dad, every time after that, would point to that spot on the tree. That's how high the wave was. That's what the trail looked like the day before, and that's what the trail looked like after. That's Andy Craig with a fish. There was fish all over up in the bushes and the trees. So a few pictures of Child's. Dana had something going with Mom. Always, they had a fun relationship. It was licorice. So they made one last trip out there on Jack Stevens' boat. And yeah, they always dressed in style. Dad always had Mom's purse. And Mom had these ponchos. I've still got one, just I can't give it up. There they are, ready to go. And Mom brought one of her 85-year-old piano students up here, and I took them all around, and we saw the moose pens. So these are some pictures of things we did in Cordova. The net loft, we'd go there and make things. Dad's making a moccasins for Rhea. And then drum. I think that was Patience was teaching us how to make deerskin drums. And of course, Abel Skeevers. You kids all know about Abel Skeevers. My dad every Saturday would make Swedish pancakes and Abel Skeevers. So there he is doing that. And then the kids always made them presents. And these are little handmade presents for Mom and Dad. And they went on Girl Scout trips. This is Nicole and Jesse's group. And we went to Camp Toga Woods. And that's Casey and Casey in my dad's arms. And at the fair, we went to the fair, and Dad decided to hula hoop, but landed at the trash can. He was trying to double hula hoop. Yeah, went on the rides. He went on the rides with, that ride was Gravitron or something. I can't remember. Anyhow, they came off. He was pretty sick after that. And then the coho, remember that? With the sourdough pancakes? Yep. Had to have those every time they came. And Dad took pictures of every single cookie, the cookie jars. And then he would help me with music camp. I was always cooking for music camp in the summer, so Dad would make his Swedish pancakes and Abel Skeevers. And start fires in the kitchen. That was... And then the salmon runs. He always wanted to do the 1 mile. And the last year, 2016, he barely made that, but Coda helped. She pulled him along. And I think their favorite thing, especially Dad's favorite thing, was to go out in the boat. And he'd go to see Knoll Palace and get his sandwich made before every single boat trip, and catch halibut with Dana or anything else that they could catch. And Rhea was way into it, so she would go with Grandpa. And so I went down to Mariposa, and they decided to close up the antique store. And they were chosen to be the grand marshals in the parade for all they'd done in Mariposa. And we went down and surprised Grandma for her 80th birthday, Rhea and I. And they started having great grandbabies with my brother, not with me. They made it up here for every graduation, for Jessie. And then we went to Jessie's college. She couldn't get away from us in Durango. Went to Four Corners. And Jessie pushed her all the way down to the ruins there and all the way back up. That was quite something. We had a blast. We spent a week there with Jessie. And then they came for Casey's and graduation, and we also went and visited Casey at Juneau, at her university. But by this time, Dad's health was not so good. Mom's dementia was getting pretty bad, so I went down and we had a big going away party. That's my mom's 2nd grade class that's left in Mariposa. And the one on the left had such a big crush on her, he told me they all did, that he still sent her Valentine's cards up until last year. Just was pretty cute. And that's our doctor down in the right. Mariposa is a wonderful community, and it was hard to say goodbye, but we packed them up, drove up. Well, my friend Ryan gave my mom one last ride in the Corvette, and then we drove up and stopped and visited everybody along the way, and that was Dad's cousin that he started pole vaulting with. Got to see him. It was pretty much the final goodbyes to everybody, and then Mom decided to have gallbladder surgery in Olympia, so we weren't able to drive all the way, but her favorite cousin was in Olympia, so they got to visit, and Mom asked the doctor in the middle of the night, or the nurse, does everybody have to have their gallbladder out to go to Alaska? And they're like, oh, no. So we ended up here in Cordova, 602 Birch Street, next to the Nosteins, and then a tree fell on the house. And my parents were sitting right in there. It was at midnight when it came down on the house, and it pulled up half the backyard, so it came down slow and didn't crush them. It should have crushed the house. As you can see, it's a huge tree. So Dad came out in the morning. What did he say, Dana?
It couldn't fit the Christmas tree inside. We had to leave it outside.
Yeah, so think about it. The tree's too big to fit inside. But we had a lot of fun here in Cordova. I was so happy I could bring them here. Lots of Christmases, and Casey made that quilt for them. They got to do Girl Scout stuff, the pumpkin shoot, and the grandma Christmas dinner. Watch Rhea play ball, watch Rhea run. Go to the games. This was homecoming, and the referee ended up in my mom's lap, and the wheelchair went back to the wall, not that wall, but the other wall. And my mom was so mad because she had dementia, she didn't understand why this man was in her lap. Luckily, she didn't get hurt. And they went to Rhea's music programs, and as most of you know, most of the kids out here had a lot of game nights. My dad would make sure there was tons of ice cream and snacks, and we'd play till 1 in the morning and sit Mom there at the table, and she'd feed the game pieces to the dog. And it was a lot of fun though, because my parents always loved games. Took him to the Salmon Jam, dressed him up. And there's Darla next to my dad, was playing the jaw harp with the band. Watch the boats come in, they like that. Went to Dress to Kill. I was always at state music, and so the girls would take Mom to Dress to Kill. And the Powder House, my dad was determined to, is it Master Blaster or something, where if you can eat 2 of those hamburgers, you get the 3rd one for free. So, you know, he would have been able to do that in his younger years, but he couldn't. He'd get through 1.5, and that was about it. And on his 89th birthday, he caught an 89-pound halibut, and that was pretty neat. And then Renee Lindo told me about this honors flight. So my dad got to go back to Washington, D.C. with Renee and some other vets from World War II. And he had never been there, so that was super neat. And then, of course, you'd always see him out for 4th of July. And at church was very important. We had lots of great times at church. They'd sleep during the sermon and then wake up for snacks.
A lot of people still do that.
Yeah. And the home port, we'd always go for game nights and meals or whatever was happening in the home port. And I'd take them every day to over to the hospital for senior lunch. And that was a birthday Dad had there. There's Adam Kenyon made them that balloon thing, balloon basket. And Mom would always have her hot chocolate. And then I got to surprise my dad for his 90th birthday. My brother, my 2 friends, and my cousin all came up. He didn't know that was happening, and so that was a thrill. Nurse Kathy would bring us the best cookies and banana bread and everything else. She has some for us today, but super special people in town. Oh my gosh, my parents loved it here. My friend brought up a photo booth stuff. My dad didn't make it for Ria's graduation. He died in November, late November of 2019, and I think he wanted to skip COVID. So, yeah, so my mom got to be there for Miss Iceworm when Ria got to be Miss Iceworm, and she was around for Ria's graduation. And they just got tired. I have some pictures, Jesse, you can. And you want to play piano? The sound's not coming through the mic system, so we'll just have Shannon play piano. This is just some pictures of Alaska when my parents came up here, just a short little slideshow to music. There's Nicole. Jesse.
is perfect. It kind of exemplifies who I am. His face was all green with frosting. Okay, well that's my slideshow and story. They live life to the fullest.
I wanted to take this opportunity, and the family wanted to as well. It is obvious what an outsized impact both Fred and Kay were able to make on so many, and wanted to have a time to be able to share any stories that anybody might have. If you wanted to stand up where you were or come forward for a mic, but if there was just any story or anything that you wanted to share, this would be a time to do that. We'll have plenty in the back as well afterward if you want to do that while looking at everything. But right now, Dana, did you have something?
I sure do.
Okay.
Well, I hadn't seen that slideshow yet. I think that's pretty awesome. I'm blown away by what you put together there. I guess I've known them for a long time, probably longer than just about anybody except Anita here. And a lot of you know that Anita loves to play cards and board games and stuff, and we spend a lot of time doing that. And you can see from the slideshow where she gets that from her folks. And before we were married, I was down there in California. I think I was rock climbing or something. And, you know, Yosemite near Mariposa, told Anita, hey, why don't I stop by, you know, your place? And so I ended up going there and meeting her folks for the first time. And it was pretty fun. We had dinner and everything. And then after dinner, the cards came out. And I was not raised as a game player, card player, or anything. And so her folks proceeded to just whoop me one game after the next. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. Oh, that was fun. Let's do this again. And they got these games where like each person at the table gets their own deck, and then everything gets piled in the middle, and it gets faster and faster. And I just was. So anyway, they sat there. It was my first meeting with them, sitting there just getting whooped out. Just seeing if I was good enough for their daughter, but it worked out. That's where the game playing comes from.
Thank you so much. Did anybody else have any stories or memories or things that you'd like to share? Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, I could say something. I guess you could kind of wonder why Anita turned out the way she did. And there you go. That's how it was. But, of course, I didn't know them back in those days. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know them back in those days, but boy, what a great example of life is well lived. And in my times here with them, it always, you know, a lot of fun times. There was potlucks and there was lots of things going on at church, and I must have ate a whole pile of Fred's cream puffs, and he always had he forever had a joke. Yes. And he'd pull me aside, Bruce, you want to hear a joke? Yeah, okay. And so he'd tell me, I can't remember any of them to this day, but there was a ton of them. And Kay was always the sweetest and kindest, and the two of them, and I always thought, what an amazing relationship they had. And I'll always, I think the thing that would stand out, maybe even the most in my mind over all those years, is the way Fred would dote over Kay at Sunday mornings at church, and you know, when it came after the sleeping, and then when it came time for the snacks. And
The important stuff.
He was always Johnny on the spot with whatever he could do for Kay before he did anything for himself. And that's the kind of guy he was, and she was just the sweetest thing, and always so appreciative. And I enjoyed going over and talking with her, and even, you know, in those times when her dementia was fairly well advanced, I don't know why, but she always seemed to recognize me and was always so happy to see me, and it was really way cool. And I feel, knowing the two of them, I feel better for it. And what amazing lives live.
Amen. Thank you, Bruce, for sharing that. Is there anyone else who had a story, a memory, or a thought to share at this time? Yeah.
Yes, Grandma, she liked to read my book. Spaghetti, pancit, and egg roll. That's all. I miss her so much.
Amen. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to share? Yes.
I went to church with Kay and Fred and all of their family. And the last 2 years of going to church, I remember there was always like an empty rocking chair next to Fred in the back row. And Kay sat in her wheelchair. And I would come in and he would take my hand and then kind of direct me to sit next to him. So the last 2 years that we each were in church at the same time, I was always holding Fred's hand. And the very last conversation, visit that I got to have with him was with Fred. And we learned something that was amazing about both of our backgrounds. I'm from California, I've lived here 7 years. And when I learned that he had a background in turkey ranching, I couldn't help but share my teenage background with turkey ranching where I grew up, because we had friends that raised 46,000 turkeys every year, free range. And what I learned, all of the processes, and he and I had this complete, knowledgeable collection of information and memories about turkeys. The first time in my whole life, I got to share that with somebody.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, Sue.
Yeah, she reminded me of the fact that he maybe held her hand, but man, he always made me feel so special when I walked into church. He would just light up, and he would get up, and he'd give me the biggest hug and smooch and say, "I'm so happy to see you." And I feel so much blessed from the kindness of those people. I just literally feel blessed to have them in my life. And thank you so much for this beautiful service. I really feel blessed to be able to see all of their life, and it was amazing.
Absolutely. I think we all probably feel the same way on that one. I know that there might be some others who also have memories and thoughts, and oh, yeah, I think y'all definitely jump in here.
All right, so we prepared a little something with Casey. Since she couldn't be here, she got COVID and could not come up, so we kind of compiled a little something from the three of us. So we were privileged to be able to spend a lot of time with our grandparents. Growing up, I remember Grandma and Grandpa coming up at least once a year and us visiting them at least once a year. When they were here, they'd always join along with us in whatever we were doing, which, if you know my mom, was always a very tight schedule. Some of my fondest memories in the summers were playing Chinese checkers and other games with my grandma. She'd be cracking jokes and teasing us the whole time, and all of our friends would be laughing the whole time. Grandpa was always so welcoming to all of my friends, to the point where many of them called him and Grandma and Grandpa as well. Even in his older years, he would talk to my friends for hours about their lives and his younger years. In our grandparents' older days, when they lived in Cordova, we got to spend a lot of time with them and help take care of them. From this, I learned so much patience, something that has carried into my teaching career. It's also neat that both my grandparents were teachers. Their kindness and humor are something that I've strived to emulate in the classroom. Though my family had to live life very differently for the past 7 years with my grandparents in Cordova, we wouldn't trade it for anything. And then this is from Casey. Growing up, Jesse was known as the selfless giving sibling and I the more selfish one. When we were young, my grandpa asked me for $1. I refused to give him one. And watched as he asked Jesse, who immediately handed over $1, which grandpa exchanged for $5. I remember being jealous and then promising myself to be more giving like my sister in the future. My grandpa was full of little life lessons like this throughout our childhood, trying to make us our best selves. My grandma taught us all piano. I think even Dana knows We Three Kings. And many hours of each visit with the grandparents were spent playing rummy, Yahtzee, and Dizzy, where Anita would get so competitive it was intimidating. My grandma was a generally happy and kind person. The only time we ever heard a mean word out of her mouth was in later dementia stages. And also, I guess, when she punched the kids. I didn't know about that. If you tried to move her dog off her lap, she'd have some threats ready for you. Other than this, she had only kind words and love for everyone throughout her life.
Being the youngest, a lot of my clear memories of my grandparents were during their older age, but every memory was full of laughter and love. My grandparents were two of the most selfless people I know. They would support me in everything I chose to do, whether that meant coming to music and dance recitals, complimenting my driving skills when I was practicing for the test, listening to me talk about my adventures, or happily accepting any craft I made for them, which, as you can see in the slideshow, weren't always the prettiest. My grandma loved to spend time with the grandkids, teaching us piano, playing games, and listening to us play music. I remember going to their house in California and sitting at the piano while my grandma taught me how to play the left-hand part to Hot Cross Buns, which I thought I was so cool for knowing how to do that. My grandpa loved to give gifts to us growing up. I remember him giving me a BB gun and teaching me how to shoot it in California. And another time he presented me with a pair of moccasins that he had sewed. He always made sure that our family and friends were well fed with lots of sweets also, as many of you know. And then this is just a little something from all of us. The most amazing testimony of our grandparents' lives carries on in our parents. They sacrificed so much in the last decade to ensure that our grandparents got to be around us and them. In the end, though, it cannot be considered a sacrifice, as Grandma and Grandpa were two people who deserved to have the best care and to have families surrounding them until the end. It also gave us kids the gift of seeing life come full circle and witnessing two people who loved each other and everyone around them right up until the end. Our grandparents showed us that being giving, accepting everyone, and laughing every day will lead to a life well lived. We aspire to be as selfless and loving as Fred and Kay were, and fill each day with laughter.
Thank you guys so much for sharing that. And I know we'll have other stories and things that we want to share, and after the service is done, that we'll have all that amazing stuff that I know so many got to see beforehand, that will be out there, and have some ice cream as well, and be able to share some of those stories and those memories. I didn't have the chance to get to know Fred and Kay very well. I actually only overlapped here in Cordova with Fred for about 6 weeks before he passed in the fall of 2019. And I had a few moments before he did, either at church, after church, when both were awake and ready for some snacks during coffee hour, or during potlucks, or blessed to have the opportunity to head over to their house and hang out with them a little bit and get to know them and hear their stories before Fred passed. And there was always, especially having watched this and then heard stories, there is a theme of being able to hang out and hear a joke over food. I think that was a defining part of what it was to fellowship with Fred Barnes there, to have that. And Anita was kind enough over the last couple weeks to let me look at the yearbooks of Fred's from 1950 and 1951 when he was at Southern California Bible College. And I noticed a few things within them. One, it was not surprising to see how Fred and Kay would be drawn to each other given the love of music that was evident in those pages. I'll be honest, whenever you turned over the math department or maybe the physics department, there were a few less signatures and notes and things written on those club pages. But when you got to the music page, the drama page, anything with instruments or singing, it was just a chorus of voices that were calling out these shared memories and shared stories and people who had signed their pictures. And I can kind of throw myself in the time machine back to those days and see how they must have just been drawn to each other magnetically with that joy, that love of music, and just being able to celebrate life together. There was another thing that I noticed that has not left my mind as I was looking over those yearbooks. A friend had written in there to Fred some parting words in his sophomore year before he transferred out of SBSC there, or BC. And his friend had signed off with this phrase, "Remember, don't be prominent, be faithful." And that phrase has stuck with me, and I have been mulling it over for days now. And I kept thinking what a temptation prominence must have been for Fred, a young, athletic, handsome, incredibly intelligent, and ambitious man who was just beginning this journey where he was experiencing so much success at track and field and so much potential and promise ahead in his life that the temptation to prominence must have been huge. Getting his name in the record books and making a name for himself and celebrating all the success that was right there at his fingertips. But I think a godly friend's reminder that being faithful takes precedence seems to have left its mark on Fred. Because when I talk to Anita or Dana or the kids, or when I talk to anyone who knew Fred and Kay and listening to stories now, it is not their prominence or their fame or their power or money or anything like that that shines through as the common thread. But it is instead their love and their joy in one another and for one another, their joy in their family and in their relationships and in corny jokes, and just all of the abilities that they had to develop love in every place that they lived. They were faithful to each other, building a life of mutual care, love, and respect, investing in each other and making sure they were strong together. Each of them overcoming obstacles and past hurts to build a foundation of love on which to build their family. They were faithful to their entire family, and as we saw, it was a large one. Visiting and coming to Cordova and making a priority to be known and to love their granddaughters here and their family back in California, to spend quality time. And I heard a story this week that they even took risks to show that love, like trying to get in good with Casey, and so specifically ordering a cheese and rice pizza, knowing those were two of her favorite foods. I'm not sure that's going to take off at Harborside, but you're welcome to try it on your own. Thankfully, it is not being offered out there as we remember Fred and Kay today. But when we talk about Fred and Kay, they were faithful above all to God. For both of them, their faith was paramount, and their relationship with God and their faith in Christ was the secret to that wellspring of joy and positivity that they brought to family and to friends each day. In the book of Hebrews, God calls all of us, and His Word says, to hold unswervingly to the faith that we profess, for He who promised is faithful. Fred and Kay's faithfulness found root in their lives because it was faith in the one who is faithful. And the light that they shined every day and with every word shined brightly because it was never their own light or their own prominence that they focused on. They rejected that temptation to just shine their own light and their own stories and their own pride out, and instead let the light and the love of Christ burst out from their words and their actions and their generous spirits. And the legacy that they leave behind is one that is defined by passing on that love and that joy and that unconditional acceptance and grace to everyone around them. That legacy lives on in their children, it lives on in their grandchildren, and even in those who knew them way too briefly, like myself. And it will continue through the lives that are touched in their memory and in their honor. So this evening, will you say a short prayer with me to honor their lives? God, we thank you for the lives of Fred and Kay as they lived them. The love that they shared and the memories and the legacy that they leave in each one of our hearts. May each one of us follow the example of Fred and Kay, setting aside our own prominence and seeking being faithful to God and to each other in love, in your name and for your glory, God. Amen. Thank you all so much. At this time, I want to invite Anita to come up to introduce our closing music today.
When we moved Mom and Dad up here, we were fortunate to live next door to the Nostines. And one morning, my dad woke up and said, I gotta go get something at Siemens to make a pole, because I think I should teach pole vaulting. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like 88. And he wanted to make a pit in the backyard, and he goes, we could get some old mattresses, and he wanted to teach the Nostines how to pole vault. And I was like, no, Dad, we're not going to do that. I knew he'd break something, but he always told me he knew how to fall. He fell on the ice. I go, are you okay? He goes, I know how to fall. Okay. But I think, you know, how you pass on, hopefully, all the good things from your parents and everything. And my mom, being a piano teacher, that's why I was a piano teacher. And while I was living next door to the Nostines, they decided, Isabel and Thomas, to come take piano. And so my mom, I'd wheel her in and go, look at these guys, look how well they play. And she'd just tell them how beautiful they were playing. They were pretty little then, they probably don't remember that. But so I asked them to learn my mom and I's favorite piano duet that we'd always get together and play, Exodus. And so bring them up here, and they could carry on Mom's spirit of playing piano.
Again, I just want to say thank you on behalf of Anita, Dana, the girls, the whole family, for everybody who came out tonight to just honor these two amazing people and these wonderful lives that they lived. And I want to thank you especially for sharing their stories with every one of us, because that was really incredible. I know that we have even more outside the room, memories and different mementos and things that are organized beautifully out there. And at this time, I know the family wanted to invite everyone to head out to be able to share your stories together, to look at those wonderful memories, and to share some ice cream as well and some different things. So thank you all so much for coming and honoring these lives. And I hope everybody has a safe ride back home as well.
Lemon meringue pie ice cream. That was my dad's favorite, where you stick the whole pie in. And then the other kind is cranberry.
I'm just here to make sure everybody has a good time and has a good laugh.
How about you? Awesome. Great.